Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Analysing Anfield, your tactics and analytics podcast, courtesy of the Blood Red channel. This week, we are engaging in a special episode, the first of two this week, because we have so much to talk about. So, this week, we're going to talk about transfers, we're going to talk about Spurs, we're going to look ahead to Brighton, and obviously, we're going to look back at West Ham as well. And the second episode this week, which will be coming later towards the weekend, will be solely dedicated to Manchester City. But as ever, I'm joined by David Hughes. Dave, how's things?
Yeah, good mate. Looking forward to talking about some transfers because it's been a rarity for us in the past, but obviously at the end of this window and the end of the last, we've had things to discuss. So I'm looking forward to doing that today.
Yeah, well, Liverpool were going down the route of not signing anyone up until the very, very end of the window. It seemed to be Joel Matip's injury, which pushed, the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like. And Liverpool have since went and signed two. So we're going to be talking about the two centre-back that Liverpool did go and sign. Quick word on Takumi Minamino as well, who's gone on loan to Southampton. But I think first of all, we're going to go down the route of Ben Davies, who is a centre-back that I must admit he did drift under my radar. I wasn't really aware of him. He wasn't a player that had shown up to me. But I think you was, I think I'm probably going to have to lean on you for this one because I know you've wrote about him. I think you've, maybe watched him in the past or whatever. So I think, I can let you take the floor with this one, Dave.
Yeah, he's a player that I really rate. Preston are a team that I've kept an eye on with one or two others in the Championship because I know they've had some good players in recent years. I think probably the two standouts are Ben Davies and Ben Pearson. Pearson's just moved to Bournemouth in the same window. Although by all accounts, he should be playing at Premier League level. Every time I've watched him, he's looked really good. I spoke to our producer, Guy, who does a lot of commentary on Preston, and we really rate him. Said he should be playing at Premier League level. So maybe that eventually comes, but in terms of obviously Ben Davies now is playing in the Premier League with Liverpool, and it's I think it's a really good option for Liverpool. He's a left-footed centre back. That's a profile Liverpool haven't got in that position. He's a good size, 6'1". But weirdly, Josh, I don't know if you've had a look at him since the announcement. He's not that great in the air, certainly this season anyway. He's had a below aerial duel success rate, below average aerial duel success rate, I should say. Just over 50%. I think the league average is around 59, which, given the size, is a little bit of a surprise, but maybe that's something to work on in the coming weeks and months. His all-round defensive approach, he tends to be pretty measured and composed. He's not very rash, doesn't go to the floor that often, which is important because I think it makes you a little bit more difficult to bypass in terms of dribbles or, less susceptible to giving away cheap fouls. And then, he's got good physical attributes as well. He's quick, got really good pace. I was having a look yesterday, and Preston's PPDA, which is obviously a metric used to measure how you press high up the pitch, how intense it is. Their average so far this season is very similar to Liverpool's. So obviously, if you think of the action Preston as a team, inevitably you need that higher defensive line. Now, when I've watched Preston, their line doesn't seem as aggressive as Liverpool's, but it is a fairly high line, and that means that in that sense he's got some experience. But I just think when you consider his profile and the fee that's being paid, which is a really low one because obviously he was coming to the end of his contract in the summer. I just think it represents some really good business. Liverpool brought in one of the better centre backs from the Championship, and he's still a decent age at 25, and I think he's probably gonna have an important role over these next coming months.
Yeah, I think it's one of them that, like, when it's needs must, it couldn't really have been much of a better deal. The risk, as you said, is very low. The fee is very low. Obviously, his contract was supposed to run out in 6 months' time. I think he was on the verge of going to Celtic when he does turn into a free. And we've poached him from there. I think I was speaking to before we came on to start actually recording. I was speaking to Guy, our producer, and I think he covers Preston a fair bit. I think he's hosted Preston podcasts and stuff like that. And he said he was ready for the Premier League about 2 years ago. So that bodes well for us. His aerial stuff, I wasn't aware of. I didn't think it was that bad. 50% is quite concerning. I thought it was up in
Yeah,
the 60s.
yeah, it was basically around maybe 51%, and as I said, the league average was over 59. So it is a little bit of concern because obviously that's something you need to be quite aerial dominant in Liverpool backline, don't you? But it's that I've only looked at half a season's worth of data there. I haven't looked at historical data. Could be a little bit better, and it's hopefully if it is a bit of a deficiency in his game, then maybe it's something he can improve on in the Liverpool side in the coming weeks and months.
Yeah, last season it's down as 59.6, and the season before it's down as 53.9. So yeah, probably not his strength, to be honest. Then, but I think he does make up for that in certain other areas, and I don't think you'll ever get a full, well-rounded package for as little as 2 million. I think you've probably got to accept limitations in certain areas, and whereby he might fall down in the air. I think the lad that we're pairing him with, which we will get to, hopefully has that on his side. In fact, he does, but we will get to that. But one thing I did notice when looking at Davies was I think his distribution from the back, his inclination to play the odd little long pass, diagonal pass over the top and stuff like that. Quick little avenues into the final third. A means of beating the press as well. Differentiating your build up and stuff like that. He seems to have that to his game, which I like, because I think that's something that Liverpool have been. They've had to consciously keep applying it, to keep it as part of the game. Whereas with Van Dijk, it was very natural; he just did it anyway. But when Gomez was trying to do it, when Fabinho was trying to do it, and to a lesser extent, I think when Henderson does it, you can tell it's a bit more robotic. It's a bit more. You can tell it's been an instruction maybe before the game. Whereas with Van Dijk, it was just natural. It just happened because it was a natural part of his game, and that looks a bit more the case with Davies.
Yeah, I see what you mean there. Like it's a little bit more orchestrated almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, with just on that point actually, I did touch on it in the piece that as I think it's gone live in the Liverpool Echo today. If anyone wants to have a look, we're recording on Tuesday. But I did find it interesting on that specific point you raised, that in terms of long passes per 90, he's basically this season averaged a pretty identical number on a per 90 basis compared to Van Dijk last season. And Davies' success rate in them is actually around 70-odd%. I think Van Dijk's was 50-odd. Now, I'd argue that it's not always a necessity to be having high pass success rates in those type of balls. Like it is great when they find their tender target, but even sometimes it just creates really good kind of counter pressing situations, doesn't it? Especially for Liverpool, who are really good at that. So it is interesting that he's got a similar output in that regard, and it does suggest that he may be able to, replicate it at Liverpool and fill that void a little bit that's been left without Van Dijk.
I think he's a good age as well. I think he's the kind of age whereby he's probably done a lot of us developing, certainly on the mental side, and I think he should be able to come into this Liverpool squad now. And whereas some might be a little bit intimidated, overawed sort of thing with the players that they're playing with, I think he seems to be quite by all accounts, he's quite a confident person. He's quite a bit of a charismatic leader type thing in the back line and stuff. And I think given his age, technically 25 is when many people believe that you start your peak years, and I'm not sure of a little bit older maybe even for a centre back, but I think Liverpool are getting them for what is supposed to be his prime years. And if it works out fairly well or whatever, or Liverpool are able to do something different further down the line, maybe he could even be sold on for a little bit of a profit, considering we're getting him for 2 million. If it seemed like, I mean, if he does okay, but still Liverpool want to upgrade. Like him doing really, really well. It's still possible that Liverpool will need better even than that. So it's possible that, you know, further down the line, he can be sold at the age of like 27, 28 or so to maybe a Bournemouth.
I thought you were going to say Bournemouth.
As far as he hasn't played for them.
Yeah.
And then Liverpool can just get like, you know, a little bit of an upgrade for the profit. So it's just a kind of deal that it's just such a. I just love the way my club do business. I must be honest. The way Liverpool find solutions to these little problems. I don't know why we didn't do it earlier. Well, I do know why we didn't do it earlier. We didn't think it was that big of an issue, but obviously now that Fabinho's picking up the odd little knock, massive so for the season, you can't really avoid it any longer. But even despite that, the way Liverpool have gone about business on deadline day, which is historically, you know, mental. I think Liverpool will come out the opposite end again with two really solid deals that, in a way, can't really go wrong.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think I think the biggest part is that, as I said, his profile is good. There is a lot to like, but I think the big thing is that what's being paid. That can be the difference maker between a really good deal or not. Because, you know, I think had Liverpool paid 20 million, for example, whether we're saying he's a good player, whether people, the likes of Guy who we touched on before, who's watched him week in, week out, says he's worth that, there's still that element of risk attached to it, isn't it? But if you paid, what is it, 1.5 mil, something like that, then, you know, it's almost I wouldn't say a free hit, but it's just, you're not going to lose any sleep if it's a deal that doesn't work out. So yeah, it's a good move. And then obviously about to come on to Kabak as well. You know, that was a good piece of business as well, from the same perspective.
Yeah, just one more little point on Davies as well. Again, just twigging memory there. I was speaking to a guy again before the podcast, and he said he was vaguely comparable to, in terms of level and quality, to Adam Webster, who was picked up by Brighton fairly recently, maybe last summer or so. Centre back from Bristol City, I think he was playing for at the time, and he's come in and obviously did a decent job at Brighton at the minute. But I think Brighton had to pay about 25 million for him, I think, at the time. So for Liverpool to get a similar level centre back from the Championship for buttons, really, you know, Liverpool are probably getting more for loaning Minamino out, to be honest. Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned Kabak there. We'll move on to him. He's probably more of the stellar name, let's say. I mean, there's an option to buy in there for 18 million. So he has a bit more of a potential to be a consistent Liverpool centre-back for the next couple of years and stuff. General thoughts on him, Dave? Was you aware of him before this? I've seen his name linked quite consistently to Liverpool, but I've never really been certain as to whether it's just agent talk or whether there's anything in it.
Yeah, so I remember he was getting linked a lot in the summer with Liverpool and Leicester. I think, was it Leicester? I'm sure it was. At that point, I had a little look. Or after that point, so I had a little look at some reports on him and tried to gauge from people who had watched them, but I haven't watched a lot of him at all, really. I know that this season being in a really poor shelter side, we've conceded a lot of goals, but we know that isn't always necessarily a reflection on a player, on a defender as a sole person, I guess. The clips I've seen on Y Scout seems to have really good physical traits. Underlying numbers look fairly decent as well. So it's kind of at that age, 20, it's a player who seems to have a lot of potential. But in terms of the real detail on the game, it's difficult for me to comment because I just haven't watched them enough.
Yeah, I mean, this was the piece that the Echo gave me, obviously because you was doing Davies. So I've looked into him a little bit more. Spoke to him on the Echo. Isn't actually up at the time of recording, but it will be. But even so, towards the end of the week, I'll write a newsletter. I'll send the newsletter out to the email addresses of people who've signed up, and at the end, I'll do a little further reading box, and I'll tag my piece and I'll tag Dave's piece for anyone who wants to read them. But yeah, he looks like a big talent. I think that's probably the best way of putting it. And his talent is probably big enough that he's currently performing at a level that is beyond his years, really. You know, he's only 20 years old. He doesn't look it. He doesn't perform like he's 20 years old. And obviously, as a result of that, his ceiling is really high. I'd say one of his biggest strengths is in the air, early dominant player. I looked at the Bundesliga this season. Players across the pitch who've accumulated a minimum of 30 aerial duels. Kabak ranks 6th in the division, with a success rate of about 75.9%. You know, that's solid. That's obviously StatsBomb's numbers, different to Wisecout's, so not entirely comparable to Davies's aerial numbers, because we're using different providers there, but still you get a bit of an insight when it comes to looking at a player who's posting around 55% compared to a player who's posting around 75%. So Kabak is certainly the more aerially dominant, more so, funnily enough, than Dayot Upamecano, who ranks 11th based on the same numbers. You got Nicolas Sule ranking 36th, Jerome Boateng ranking 24th, Jonathan Tah of Leverkusen ranking 19th. So, you know, Kabak's right up there with the best in the league for aerial success. And in terms of being the way he defends, aggressive, proactive, front foot defender, uses his body. And to be honest, I think I've seen a few comparisons to the one and only Dejan Lovren. And I'm probably going to cause a bit of conflict there when I say this, but I think they're fairly accurate. I do see it. I do see it, and I mean that in a positive way, actually, because I think all in all things considered, I think Dejan Lovren for a fair few years was a top defender. Lovren's biggest problem was every now and then he had an error in him, but his general game, what you need from a centre back in terms of being able to use the ball, being relatively quick, being good in the air, being up for a battle, strong, winning most of your duels, that sort of stuff. Lovren ticked a fair few boxes, hence why Klopp kept him round, and he got rid of certain other players. So I can see the comparison with Kabak and Lovren, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking as well, for all the kind of eye rolling that comes with Lovren's name, he would have been welcome within the squad, wouldn't he? Would have been someone who you'd be thankful to have had over these past few months when this defensive kind of crisis has hit. Because, yeah, he, you know, not that I'm giving much insight saying this, but he may have things like the odd mistake in him, which I'd love to articulate with more analysis, but it's the best way to summarize.
Just to clarify, you're referring to Lovren there.
Yeah. Come on, okay. Yeah. Sorry, to be clear, I'm talking about Lovren. You would have, I think Liverpool would have preferred to have him available over these last few months and maybe left in this coming summer or even in this window once Liverpool made these signings. So to have someone who's potentially performing or as a similar profile to him, but maybe a higher ceiling, can only, from my opinion, can only be seen as a positive.
Yeah, I mean, just to be clear on the Lovren thing, I think it's a stylistic thing that I think I'm getting at. Like I think it was Michael Cox who come out with the kind of comparison that when you look at a centre back pair, and he's always viewed centre backs as a cat or a dog, based on how they perform on the pitch. Obviously, it kind of, without me even explaining it, it's just common sense to understand where I'm coming from there. Van Dijk, for example, is a cat, quite clearly. Cool, composed, doesn't really dive in, nothing like that. Whereas Lovren, for me, was a dog. Lovren was more engaged in the fight, more inclined to chase the ball and chase opponents and all that sort of stuff, more inclined to put a foot in. And I think Kabak's just more of them. Kabak's more of a stopper than a cover type defender, maybe. I think he's different to Matip in that sense. Probably a bit closer to a Gomez, Lovren type. I don't. The positive thing on that is, I think he's a lot younger, obviously, than Lovren. So Klopp's getting him rather than getting him at the age of 25, which I think was the case with Lovren. He's getting Kabak at the age of 20, whereby he can still shape his game. He can still impact how he plays and stuff like that. Can still coach him through things and stuff. And obviously, with him being a lot younger as well, he's got a bit of pace on Lovren. He's a bit quicker than him. Not quick to the extent where it's a bit silly and it's like Gomez and Van Dijk. He's not quite that level, but he's not slow enough to get, targeted as a weakness, for example. So, considering we're getting him for I think it might be a 2 million loan fee, and the option to buy might be 18 million. As I said, he's a big talent. He's got a high ceiling if he can get certain aspects of his game in order, and if he can, improve certain areas. He's a big talent. He's got a high ceiling. So Liverpool could be getting a top defender there for the next decade, really, for 18 million, 20 million. So, again, it's just another a different type of deal to Davies, but another example of Liverpool ensuring that no matter what, there's always value present in the deal.
Yeah, it's basically an audition, isn't it? And if you're looking at a player who looks to be a top talent, you're almost guaranteed that you'll be able to purchase him in the summer. If you look at him day in, day out in matches, and you think, even despite his age, he hasn't got he probably, in their opinion, the Liverpool recruitment team isn't going to go on and be a top player, then you're not obliged to buy him. I agree. I think it's a good deal, and I just think, considering where Liverpool were, this time last week, and they were up against it a little bit. I think what's important to touch on this is, it's quite clear, isn't it, that even though Liverpool were going to let the window come and go without recruiting, they've always got the short list of names ready to pursue. And I think you saw that yesterday, didn't you? You saw them sounding out maybe the top four from that list. But I don't know what order it would have been in, but you got like.
To be honest, Dave, I'm glad you've just flagged that, because that's going to give us a chance to blow our own horn, really, isn't it?
Go on,
because apparently the player Liverpool were trying to buy is the player that, funnily enough, me and Dave both had on our list in November when we did the centre backs episode after Gomez got injured. Dave picked two and I picked two. We didn't compare until we actually got on the podcast, and we both had Dush Kaletakar, who currently plays for Marseille. And the word yesterday, according to plenty of reliable sources, was that Liverpool were in for him. 23 million, I think, might have been the fee. His girlfriend posted a Beatles song on an Instagram feed, but I think
I didn't know that.
They were walking on a beach with all you need is love playing in the background. And apparently the deal fell through a little bit because Marseille simply didn't have time to get a replacement. And because of that, Liverpool probably would have had to pay more to twist their arm. Liverpool didn't do that. Maybe it'll happen again in the future. But it would have been nice, to be honest, because it was the player that me and you both had. And it would have been nice for them to sign because, I suppose it adds a degree of credibility to the podcast, maybe. But
at least you can conclude, though, that he's obviously on that list of targets, isn't he? Which says, we're kind of in and around the right ballpark in terms of potentially players that, that Liverpool would be looking at.
Yeah, I must admit I'd have preferred him to Kabak. I think there's a reason Kabak was below him on the short list, it looks like. But nevertheless, it's I'm looking forward to seeing him play. It's going to be interesting to see if they get thrown in immediately, because we've got Brighton at home and then we have Manchester City. So if they get thrown in at Brighton. You don't throw them in at Manchester City, do you? So it's going to be an interesting one to keep an eye on that. Obviously, by the time we next speak on the later episode this week for the Manchester City preview, they hopefully will have played and we'll be able to elaborate a little bit on what we saw. But when it comes to quickly, outgoings, a little bit surprised that Takumi Minamino left for Southampton on loan.
I'm surprised at how late it come, but had this had this been a story building across January and then eventually concluded with him leaving on loan, I don't think I would have been. I think I was just shocked that it happened. It seemed to happen so late. But no, I'm not that shocked really. I think unfortunately, he has struggled over these 12 months. And what I would say on that is, it's probably one that had, for all the pats on the backs for the recruitment team, this one hasn't worked out. And there's no other way really, I think you can sugarcoat it. But there is a big caveat in that at the time it was made, it did look good on paper. Because funny enough, I'm reading a book at the moment about the Red Bull Group and how they came into the football industry. Getting involved with the likes of Salzburg, Leipzig, and obviously New York and so on. And there was a small section on Leipzig that then goes on to Salzburg and talks about Liverpool playing them in the Champions League last year and talk about Minamino as well. And two things that stood out for me was, the first was he was scouted by RB for 18 months at Osaka before they even made a move for them. So it kind of shows that he kind of slugged it out a little bit and kind of improved his worth. But the second was, it said that he struggled to adjust when he arrived at Salzburg as well. And the thing that kind of changed that was Jesse Marsch kind of gave him a real good run in the team. And he took advantage of that and managed to, start producing his best form, solidify himself in the team, and went from there really. And I just wonder, that's been really difficult to do at Liverpool, hasn't it? Because of how good they've been, how they're trying to compete on so many fronts. They can't really afford to draw or lose games. They have to win them all. So it's really hard to dislodge top talents and kind of have a transition period. But maybe it's Southampton, if he gets played week in, week out, you might just see him producing his best stuff and, get that confidence, get that adjustment to the Premier League that Liverpool could benefit from next year.
The thing is as well, if he does go there and do well, and he comes back and Liverpool still don't really want him, if he was to sell him to a Premier League club or sell him to Southampton, who I'm led to believe wanted some sort of option to buy in there, it probably would be more than the 7.5 Liverpool paid for him. So it was one of them at the time that even if he didn't really perform, even if it didn't really go well, Liverpool were never really going to have to take much of a hit on this player. Liverpool were going to get some sort of profit because of how cheap we were getting him for. But yeah, it just doesn't seem to have worked. And I think there's been plenty of speculation surrounding why, he's been behind the scenes. Why hasn't he been getting games? And it's quite unlike Klopp, I think, because the last time he played, he scored. But I remember Klopp did an interview with Gary Lineker in his office. And Gary Lineker just kind of asked him, what do you do when players aren't playing? How do you keep them happy? Because you seem to be able to keep harmony in a squad when players aren't playing every week. And Klopp just kind of said, well, if a player comes to me and asks why he's not playing, I'll be able to tell him, I'll be able to help him, stuff like that. He said, but the truth is that you're not good enough. And I think it kind of is as simple as that. With Minamino, I don't think we have to think much beyond that. I just don't think he's at the level. I think it's, there's not much beyond it. Liverpool are an elite team at the minute, going for league titles, Champions Leagues and stuff. And, for whatever reason, Minamino doesn't seem to be up to the standard. Whether he's settled or not, remains to be seen and stuff. But I don't think we need to overthink it much. I think I have a lot of faith in Klopp's ability to manage a squad. I think he's shown to be one of the best around at doing it. And for Minamino not to get minutes, he's clearly just not at the level, not good enough for whatever reason. So, good luck to him out there. I think it's a good move for him. I think it's as good as a move as you could possibly get, to be honest, in the Premier League. I think if he's going to make it in the Premier League, it'll be there. In a system like that, playing for a manager like that style of play, lower expectations and stuff. So hopefully he does well. But I don't think it bodes well for him future-wise, considering, he's people forget I think he's 26. He's not a kid anymore, Minamino. So I wouldn't be surprised if he does well and we end up selling him in the summer, to be honest. But we'll see how he goes. Anything further to add, Dave, on the transfer window, or can we move on?
I think we can move on, mate. Yeah, I think we've covered all bases, as you say.
Well, another landscape that's changed considerably since we last spoke is on the pitch, because Liverpool were going into this week, and I must be honest, I was as concerned as I have been for about the past 18 months. I was looking at Spurs, I was looking at West Ham, and I was concerned that Liverpool were going to come away from these matches without a win. But egg on my face, Liverpool have turned the corner. It looks like two really, really good performances and two deserved wins. With Spurs in particular, the expected goals on the day was 2.1 for Liverpool and just 0.2 for Spurs. 14 shots to 3. So, proper dominant performance. Might have been a bit of a different story if Son's opening goal would have stood, because as we said before last week, it's a different game if Spurs can take a lead against you. But obviously Liverpool managed to turn it around, and I think it was one of our best displays of the season.
Yeah, struggle to add anything on that. I totally agree. I thought it looked tricky on paper. I'm sick of us doing our predictions because just have a knack of making us look stupid. I feel like we kept backing them for the wins when they were going through that difficult period, and then we started talking about the threat of maybe losing, and then this happened. But yeah,
people don't know that was actually intentional. That was a bit of tactics. I was just trying to play with fate.
Yeah, it's called a Christian Walsh crying it in. I think he's the master of it. But yeah, it's. I thought. I'll be honest, Josh. I was really, really impressed with this performance. I thought it was dominance from start to finish. Really, I agree. I think had that goal stood, maybe it does change things a little bit. But in relative terms of this season with VAR, it was a fairly conclusive offside, wasn't it? Compared to some of the ones that get given. So, it was offside, should have been flagged offside. And yeah, I just thought the team mechanics worked really well. I know Kane goes off the pitch, but I thought even in the first half, okay, he looked a little bit ginger, shall we say, from the injury, but I thought he wasn't doing a lot. I just thought Liverpool looked really controlling. Even against like Ndombele, I thought Ndombele kept illustrating just how dangerous he can be and how good he can be. But even if he managed to get himself 5 yards, there was just little on for them because Liverpool were doing so well in other areas of the pitch. And yeah, I think it was in many ways a kind of perfect performance.
Yeah, a little bit of a stroke of luck for Liverpool to for Kane to go off after 45 minutes. Obviously, a lot of what they do, particularly in attack, goes through him. He's the man to feed Son a lot of the time. So, yeah, a little bit lucky there. But I think the way in which Liverpool set up, obviously at the start particularly, was a little bit different. I was a little tiny bit surprised that Wijnaldum seems to drop back as the 6, with Thiago used as an 8. I think you wrote about this, didn't you? So, I'll let you take the floor on it, but I thought it was an interesting move, and I think, in hindsight now, it worked. It worked very well, and we used it again for West Ham.
Yeah, it did. Obviously, we know kind of Wijnaldum can basically do. Well, that's the best way to put it. He can do anything, can't he? Really, in that midfield.
The chameleon.
Yeah, the chameleon. Yeah, that's it. So he kind of held that position really well. I think he's proven to be a lot less erratic than maybe Thiago. We both picked up on something quite similar last week, didn't we? But Thiago seems to go to the floor. Relatively speaking, he hasn't played a lot, but he goes to the floor a lot. Consequently, gives away kind of fouls as well. I think Wijnaldum is a lot more measured in his defensive approach. I think he presses really well. He doesn't overcommit, so he kind of naturally suits being that 6 more. And you got Milner. He was flanked by Milner, who was almost tucking in to form like a. And Klopp alluded to it, so this isn't guesswork. He alluded to it after the game, but it was almost like a double pivot / 2-man 6. With Thiago then able to push further forward, impact the game further up the pitch, join the front 3, almost as creating like a 4-man attack. And Thiago ends up having his most touches in the attacking third of the season, his fewest in the defensive third. And I think when you think of Thiago's profile, you want him higher up the pitch, don't you? Not that he's some sort of goal and assist machine, but I think he's very important in the attack and build-up phase when you get into those deeper areas of the opposition's half. And yeah, so as I said, he was given more freedom to push further forward, knowing that the protection come from Wijnaldum initially, but also Milner tucking in. And sometimes, if you look back on that game, it looked often like almost like a 4-2-3-1 formation. Like the back line, two in front, and then you got like the four in front of the two. But yeah, as I said, I really liked the mechanics of it. Wrote about it afterwards, and I thought it worked really well on the night.
Yeah, and I did as well. I liked. I thought when Liverpool were going through the tricky period, I did toy with the idea of, when something like this is happening, you can't really measure the impact on the mental side of things. And I did think at the time, I'm not sure if I'd just kind of include Milner for the next few games, just as a focal point, a leader, a man who's been there. I know it's kind of like intangibles that you can't really measure and stuff like that, but with Henderson dropping back into defence at times, have Milner in the midfield. Klopp seems to use Milner when Liverpool maybe have a lead in big games. Milner will come on, maybe 70 minutes gone, and just kind of help his team see the game out. He's the big man in the dressing room before the match, relaying plenty of the instructions that Klopp's ran through in the pre-match analysis and all that sort of stuff. So he's just that kind of player, and I think he's been massive for Liverpool this week. Not necessarily in terms of how he's specifically contributing with the ball, but just kind of his presence. I know it's an intangible experience. What does it mean, sort of thing? But anyone who's played the game on the pitch, you can't really put a value on having one of those lads next to you, just kind of coaching you through what might be a tricky period and stuff. And obviously, Thiago playing a little bit more further forward, able to impact things in and around the final third rather than moving Liverpool towards the final third, which is what he's been doing in the weeks before. I think he was in and around number 10 positions at times. I think I saw one or two comments that he was kind of a little bit of like a double 10 with Firmino at times. And yet it was just a top performance, and obviously Liverpool kept that makeup for the West Ham game, really. In a way, at least. I mean, Wijnaldum was still as the 6. Thiago was still as an 8 of sorts. But without Mane and without Firmino. And obviously Origi comes in, plays up front. Shaqiri comes in, plays as number 10. And Liverpool played what looked like a midfield diamond, which is a formation that Liverpool I've kind of had a little bit of an affinity with for the past decade. Every now and then a diamond seems to come into Liverpool's makeup, and we always seem to play really well with it for a period. We did it with Rodgers and stuff, and Klopp does it every now and then. I don't think it's ever going to be a primary formation for Liverpool, but every now and then when you've got the players for it and you have to adjust, it does tend to work.
I think you just touched on it at the very end there. I think players and adjustments are key, aren't they? Because you look at Origi, for example, and I think he really struggles to kind of be this wide man. He's not really a natural. Well, I don't know what Origi is at this stage, to be honest. But having Salah as kind of like a centre forward is perfect. I think Shaqiri does quite well as at the tip of a diamond, doesn't he? And then we've already talked about obviously Wijnaldum staying in that 6 area, what Milner does as well, and Thiago able to just push a little bit more forward. So, on paper, it really worked. When you seen the team news, did you expect it, or did it catch you off guard a little bit until they started?
It caught me off guard. Yeah, I didn't expect.
Yeah, same. Yeah, same.
But when it played out, I was happy it was getting used, because it one thing a diamond should always give you. It should always give you control in the middle of the park. It should always give you an element of dominance in the centre of the pitch, and it's up to the opposing team to start exploiting your diamond by switching the play and really using the flanks. But I don't think West Ham ever really did. There was one moment, I think, where I think maybe Declan Rice switched it to Cresswell, and he got a bit of an overload on the on Trent's side of the pitch. But other than that, Liverpool had real control for large periods, and I think it stemmed from what a diamond gives you.
Yeah, and I also think obviously a diamond's naturally missing width, isn't it? But when you've got wing backs like Liverpool do, they provide the width, and it's you end up getting a really good kind of positions right across the pitch. So it worked really well, and this was another game that I thought could be really difficult. But watching it, especially without some key players, but watching it, I just thought Liverpool were really on it again. I wouldn't even say West Ham played particularly poorly, in my opinion. It just felt like Liverpool were the superior side, the Arsenal the superior side, and there's little you can do really as an inferior team when you come up against these teams and they're on song. And I thought Liverpool were.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the performance. I thought Liverpool in the first half had total control without really having much of the real scoring threat. And I think in the second half, Liverpool kept the majority of that control, but just added goals to it really. And I think throughout, Liverpool kept West Ham quiet, which is, before the game, I looked at it and thought, West Ham have got a good side there. I looked at Soucek and Rice in the middle of the park, and as a double pivot, they tick a lot of boxes that you'd want. They can cover a lot of ground, big physical players, can both use the ball, but can both put a foot in as well. And then ahead of that, they had creative types who should, in theory, be good in transition. You had Ben Rama there, you had Antonio, Pablo Fornals. These are players who are difficult to manage 1v1. Liverpool just coped really, really well, I thought, and the expected goals on the day, Liverpool posted 1.8 and West Ham posted bang on 1. But what I will say about West Ham posting that is, I'd say over 50% of West Ham's expected goals stems from, Craig Dawson's tapping from the set piece on the 87th minute. It did stem from a corner and stuff, but he does end up hitting it with his foot, and it's in the 6-yard area. So that chance you're looking, that's registering as a big chance. That, and I think without that, West Ham's expected goals is very low for the game. So according to the XG, it was probably a 2-0 Liverpool win, and then class just kind of shows, especially with the counter-attacking goal that Liverpool scored. Which seems to be a regular theme whenever we go to play West Ham away from home for some reason.
Yeah, they're nice, those ones, aren't they, when they come off? Very Manchester United 2009, but then as you just touched on there, very Liverpool against West Ham previously. So it was I thought the ball by Alexander-Arnold was good. I thought Shaqiri's was good in the sense they put it in the right area, but I do think Salah makes that goal. I think the touch and the finish is integral, really. I think a lesser player might skew that touch or miss the one-on-one, but it felt like he had his mojo a little bit back in that game, which is probably a good sign for the next few weeks. Getting some big games. Quickly as well, by the way, I know he came off the bench and he didn't do a lot, but I think Jones had a big impact, didn't he, on that first goal, because it felt like maybe even though we've just been rightly applauding the team selection and the system and stuff, it felt like when he replaced Milner, he'd obviously had the instructions to just be a little bit more free and direct, and I think he carries the ball really well towards the edge of the penalty area leading up to that goal, and then I think he might even get the assist, doesn't he, for Salah's goal? Although Wisecout, I'm just looking now, Wisecout haven't credited it with him, but I can't see why not, because it was an obvious assist for me. But anyway, I think he does well, and he probably deserves a little nod.
Well, I think Klopp's subs in general were spot on, because seconds after the Jones comes on, he registers an assist, and for Liverpool's third goal, the Genie Wijnaldum tap-in, the actual link-up play to get Liverpool in the box was Firmino, and then a little back heel from Oxlade-Chamberlain, and then Firmino squares it for Wijnaldum to tap in. But Firmino and Ox both came on together around the 70th minute, I think. So Klopp's used 3 substitutes there, and 2 of them bagged an assist, and Ox didn't, but he played the pass before the assist, if you like. So, it changes games. But I think just on Liverpool's counter-attacking goal there, I thought it was interesting in the match of the day. I'm not sure if he calls it Dave Eddie Howe was on, and he said when he was at Bournemouth, he said specifically when Bournemouth faced Manchester City and Liverpool, because of the threat that they offer from corners going up the opposite end of the pitch so quickly, Eddie Howe and Bournemouth would actually sacrifice one attacking player going into the box to head the corner in the goal. They'd actually sacrifice one of those, keep them outside the box to prevent counter-attacks from materialising. So, it's just the impact that I suppose fear can have on an opposing team. That, some managers will adjust and will go more defensive to compensate against that attacking threat. And if they don't, they'll get done like West Ham did against Liverpool.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't surprise me, Eddie Howe saying that, because I think it is a real risk. It's you're at a vulnerable situation, really, aren't you? Because think of another game state beyond the set piece where you would commit centre backs and multiple players into the penalty area, in open play. Like, you just wouldn't do it because of this obvious risk of being punished on the counter. But yeah, on set pieces, because of the law of potentially scoring, you do it, don't you? But it's such a vulnerable situation, and wouldn't surprise me if teams like Liverpool, top sides, do focus on trying to score from these counter-attacking situations in training.
Yeah. Just a quick word on Naf Phillips then, before we move on to Brighton, because I thought he was superb for the second time this season against West Ham. I thought he was absolutely spot on. If Kabak comes in, or if Davies comes in and they have a debut like Phillips performed against West Ham, people will be getting really excited.
Yeah, he's I think he's looked fairly good when he's come in. More seasoned Liverpool fans, maybe rather than analysts, have said to me that they don't particularly rate him. So I wonder whether I've missed something. But I think he looks okay. Josh, I don't know if you picked up on this. I thought you might have, but I think if you did, you would have maybe said it now. But I had a quick look on Wisecout, and obvious caveat, he's only played 430 minutes. But of all Premier League centre-backs who've played over 400 minutes so far this season, his aerial duel success rate is 80%, and it's the best in the Premier League.
No,
which is, as I said, obviously it's a small sample, but it speaks volumes, doesn't it? That those games that he has played in, he's been really dominant in the air.
Yeah, I'll double check now on StatsBomb's numbers to see if they've got him the same, because he has shown up as an aerially dominant player. So according to StatsBomb, he ranks third with 80%, behind only Rodri at City and Anderson at Fulham, centre-back, which is still, top stuff. I mean, if he can keep that up, he'll help Liverpool this season. But I think crucially, though, some people will suggest that, on the back of this performance, he can't really be dropped for one of the new lads. My only issue with that is, I think West Ham were very well suited to him in terms of the direct game that Moyes was clearly going to play, and the aerial duels he was obviously going to have to contest. I think against Brighton midweek, Brighton did a lot more keep the ball on the floor type stuff, progressing through the thirds and things like that, balls in behind specifically. I think they tried a lot of through balls when we went and faced them away from home earlier in the season. So my only issue with that is, the whole horses for courses thing. Whether Phillips is as suited to performing against Brighton compared to West Ham, I'm not so sure. We might as well move on to Brighton with this, but I'm not sure whether this would be a bit more of a platform for him to get his weaknesses in the spotlight a bit more. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that his profile suits that. Suits that kind of facing a more, how would you label it, physical side, I guess. Not that I'm trying to put Brighton down, but Brighton are probably a better footballing team, aren't they? They have a more clear philosophy, identity, and they're quite a difficult team. It was a draw, wasn't it, early on in the season against Liverpool? Yeah, it was, wasn't it? 1-1. I know the goal came late, but we both said, didn't we, after that match, that he performed fairly well and Liverpool struggled in that game. And I mean, I'm just having a look now, Josh. You've only conceded one goal in the past 4 league matches, and that was against Manchester City away. So they went to the Etihad, conceded once, and that was it. Since then, they've gone to Leeds, clean sheet, Fulham at home, clean sheet, but then Tottenham at home, clean sheet as well. So, we look at it and think, we know they've looked okay on the underlying metrics for a while at both ends of the pitch. We've put their underperformance down to player quality in both boxes, but maybe there is an element of regression to the mean as well. Kind of, and that's what we're seeing now. Maybe they are difficult to score goals against because they're decent side.
I mean, with Liverpool picking up a bit of form, I am going into this one naturally with a bit of confidence, but I'm not really sure if I should, because I do rate Brighton highly on the performance side of things. At least I don't think they've been that good this season in terms of getting over the line and converting those performances into results. But on the performance side, they do look strong. That wasn't Dave growling at me. I think that was his dog.
Yeah, I was like, what just happened there? Yeah, he obviously doesn't like Brighton. Mustn't like Brighton.
Yeah, maybe it's a sign, mate, that we're in for a tough game. But yeah, I think looking at Liverpool's season, Brighton have been one of Liverpool's toughest games, if not the toughest game. I know Liverpool nearly snatched the win, but if we did snatch a win on that day, it probably would have been undeserved, to be honest, and that doesn't often happen. Liverpool getting undeserved wins, but Brighton did deserve something from the match earlier in the season. And of all the games Liverpool have played in the Premier League so far this year, Liverpool took the fewest shots against Brighton. In that match, Liverpool managed only 6 efforts on goal, which is the fewest Liverpool have posted this season. I think overall, Liverpool tend to average about 15 to 16 per game. And the second fewest above that is the game against West Ham at Anfield. We posted 8 shots. The game against City away, we posted 9. But yeah, Brighton away, we only posted 6. And if you look at their actual defensive numbers, they are seriously impressive. So for expected goals against, not including penalties, Brighton is second in the league. So according to expected goals, Brighton have got the second best defence in the league. For shots against, the third. So again, really, really high up. And the fourth for goals against. I think they suffered a little bit early on because of the goalkeeper and stuff like that. I think he's since gone to Arsenal. But on the defensive side of the game in particular, Brighton seem really, really well coached, really well drilled. And it's going to be tricky for Liverpool to penetrate this team and to get good chances in and around the penalty spot.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now with the just pure goals conceded, and from open play, only Wolves, Leicester, Tottenham, City conceded fewer. They seem to have a bit of a set piece issue, didn't they, at the start of the season? I've just checked on that now. They've conceded from 7 set pieces, which is as many as Liverpool. It's about the 7th worst. They also conceded 6 penalties, which is a joint league high. So they've kind of had, I guess, maybe not set pieces, but certainly penalties. You consider them non-repeatable actions, don't you? And when you remove them, you've got really good underlying numbers and a really good kind of defensive record, I guess. So it is going to be quite tough, maybe, to break these down. It could be a bit of a tricky game. I'm like you. I'm still confident from a Liverpool perspective because I think Liverpool look to be finding their feet again. They'll probably be boosted by a few new faces in the dressing room as well. So I do expect them to win, but maybe they won't blow them away like people might expect when you're coming up against a team that's 17th in the Premier League table.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned set pieces there, actually, because that's one thing I forgot to mention in reference to Kabak. He scored 6 goals in the Bundesliga. over the past 2 seasons, excluding this season. This season he hasn't got any yet. But last season he got 3, season before he got 3. And all 6 of those stem from set-piece deliveries into the box. Liverpool have lacked that a little bit this season. And when I looked into it for the newsletter last week, when I looked at Trent Alexander-Arnold, most of Trent's key passes, I think it was over 50% of his key passes last season, came from set pieces, dead balls. Robertson, I think only 25% of his came from dead balls. And then shock this season, Robertson's looked more like his usual self than Trent has. But I think a lot of it's because Trent's set pieces have been a lot less effectual. They've had to play short a lot more because Liverpool haven't had a presence in the box. With Kabak, Liverpool might have a bit of that back. So it'll be interesting to see if he plays against Brighton, considering that seems to be one of the few ways you can actually get at this team defensively. On the attacking side, Brighton rank 10th for expected goals in 90, excluding penalties. 8th for shots, but 15th for goals. So that suggests that, if they're ranking 8th for shots, 10th for XG, but 15th for goals, shows that they're not maybe the type to actually put those chances away. They maybe need a few of them. And that probably sums up what they were like when we faced them first earlier in the season, away from home. I recall them creating a fair few good chances, but they just don't put them away. They struggle at the business end of both pitches, really.
Yeah, exactly that. So it's, we were just applauding the defence, weren't we? And obviously, you just talk about the underlying numbers, but even in this relatively good run of form they're in now, didn't score at the Etihad. Scored 1 against Leeds, didn't score against Fulham at home, and managed just a 1 goal against Tottenham as well. So that does reaffirm that, they've made themselves maybe a little bit more difficult to break down and to score against. But is that coming at the expense of the attack as well? The underlying numbers for the season says they're not a great attacking side, and the recent goal record says that too. So it could maybe be a low scoring game, but one that you'd probably fancy Liverpool to come out on top.
Well, they tend to field about, I think it's about 8 centre backs per game or something like that. It's probably no surprise that they're good on the defensive side and not so good going forward. But do you think this one might be a case of, like, if Liverpool manage to score 2, we will probably win? I know that's probably the case most weeks anyway, but this more than ever seems like the type of team that you can just, if you're outscored them to a certain level, Brighton are going to achieve 2 goals in a single game very infrequently this season, I think, based on the way they tend to perform.
Well, let's have a look now. How many times they've done it quickly? I've got the information here. So they've done it once at home all season. This is quite bizarre, Josh. They've done it once at home. Twice at home, but they've done it 1, 2, 3, 4 times on the road. So that's about 40% of the away matches they've scored it. But I don't think you can read. Yeah, I don't think you can read too much into that. It's just interesting. But I agree. I do think should Liverpool maybe get the first goal and a second to kill the game, I don't think there's going to be much of a route for Brighton to come back. Although predictions have been horribly wrong for a while now after us doing so well. So who knows?
Well, you say that, Dave. We are at that point. So predictions ahead of this one. What are you suggesting?
I'm going to be so boring and go with 2-0. 2-0 Liverpool.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go 2-0, but a tough 2-0. It won't be comfortable. I think for most of the game, there'll only be 1 goal in it. And I think if Liverpool manage to bag 2, I think the second will come fairly late on, with Brighton maybe committing a few players forward. That's just roughly how I see the game going.
Yeah.
Lately, it's been really difficult to predict anything. I probably should predict a 3-0 loss and Liverpool will maybe win 4-0 or something like that. But, hopefully we're a bit more on hopefully we've got a bit more accuracy this week when it comes to the prediction, but I just can't. We have to paint Brighton as a team that are very well coached, very difficult to play against, really, really good in defence, not so good in attack, albeit they're quite good at generating opportunities. You just can't put the ball in the back of the net. So, that is what Liverpool are facing. What ends up coming out the opposite side, I don't know. But I'm going to say 2-0. Dave's saying 2-0. And we'll be back we'll be back later in the week to speak about Manchester City. And as I said, what will hopefully be a top of the table clash. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Dave.
Cheers, mate. Cheers, everyone.
And be sure to tune in later in the week. Cheers.